The Raptors really did have a chance in this one, but they had another patented second half collapse. For them to be heading into halftime tied at 49 was pretty decent for them. They obviously led for the majority of the first half and let Cleveland back into it to close the second quarter. But all things considered, in a Game 7 at Cleveland, going into halftime tied was a fine spot for them to be in. If they had pulled it together in the second half, they absolutely could have pulled it out. But they could not buy a bucket in the third, and by the fourth, it was just too little too late. The Cavs had outscored them by so much in the third that they just weren't ever going to pull it out in the fourth. It wasn't an outstanding offensive game for the Cavs by any means, but they did enough to outlast Toronto, who could not get their threes to fall, and they did let Cleveland control the free throw disparity, which was to their complete detriment. Scottie Barnes was the best overall player throughout this series, but foul trouble in Game 7 meant that he wasn't on the floor as much as the Raptors would have liked. Toronto was always going to be hard-pressed to be the first team to pull a road win this series. They absolutely had a chance in this one, but their shots just were not falling, and they couldn't play Scottie as much as they wanted. And with a BI and Emmanuel quickly out for Game 7, it was always going to be an uphill battle that the Raptors just ultimately could not pull out. The biggest bright spot of the night for the Cavs was Jarrett Allen having a legacy game. He was the one guy all night that Toronto had absolutely no answer for. He led the way on the offensive glass with 8, which was more than the entire Toronto team combined. And the rest of the team followed suit, with Cleveland picking up 20 offensive boards to the Raptors 7, which absolutely could have been the primary difference maker in this one, with every decision being so critical in a Game 7 environment. We did ultimately see the possession battle end at a pretty similar rate, but again, the Cavs got to the free throw line so much more than the Raptors that was another big part of the difference. This matchup really did come down to Toronto just not having enough offense these final few games. They could build leads but struggled to hold them with no Brandon Ingram or Emmanuel quickly. In a fully healthy series, this one very likely would have swung the Raptors' way, seeing as they almost pulled it out, even with two of their best players not on the floor for some of those most decisive games. Overall, this was a massive season for Toronto in terms of building a winning culture again and creating team chemistry. They went from not even being a play-in team last year to being very close to home court advantage this postseason, so they do look to have the makings of one of the most promising young teams in the East, and certainly not someone you want to run into next season if they are fully healthy come playoff time. It is worrisome for the Cavs that they did look as vulnerable as they did in this series against a Raptors team that was way ahead of schedule, pushing them to 7. They can't have the same offensive woes heading into round 2 against the Pistons. The season series was a tie with each team taking 2 games, but the Pistons not only have more momentum on their side, coming off of 3 consecutive wins, and rediscovering their identity en route to that 3-1 comeback, but they also have a much stronger defense than Toronto, and if the Cavs were struggling to find offense against the Raptors, I do worry even more so about their ability to do it against a hyper-physical Detroit team. If Cleveland's threes aren't falling like we saw it throughout much of this series, I don't give them much of a chance, with their backcourt not being likely to find any easy looks in the paint against Detroit. So there would be a heavy level of reliance on Allen and Mobley to win their matchups with Jalen Duren, Assert Thompson, Isaiah Stewart, and whoever else the Pistons throw at them. I'm not super confident in the Cavs' ability to respond to that, nor do I feel that Detroit will have nearly as tough a time finding their offensive rhythm against a fairly undersized Cleveland team. So with the Cavs' offense being the X factor in this series and its inconsistency in what was only a warm-up series for their main event, I am giving this one to Detroit in 6. I do think that there is ultimately a chance that this Detroit team is still too inexperienced to pull it out, but the Cavs honestly don't have that much more playoff experience. James Harden is a notorious playoff choker. Donovan Mitchell has never made it out of the second round. And then guys like Mobley and Jarrett Allen also just don't have tons of experience, and they don't have a big vet presence on the Cavs roster outside of that starting lineup. So I do think that the Pistons pull this one out. I don't think it will be too close, but I do think that the Cavs sneak out a few games that they maybe shouldn't.